Okay, so my name is Corey Krieger, and today I'm going to walk you through my final presentation for EDS 709 Applied Research 2, a class I really enjoyed and felt that it was very beneficial to me. The final paper that I ended up completing was titled Reduced Language Immersion for Guatemalan, Haitian, and Hispanic Students and Its Impact on English Language Learners at a Rural Southern High School. My research question was very simple. The purpose of this research was to explore the views and attitudes students had within the ELL program as they neared graduation. Every student that I interviewed was a junior or higher, and basically as I interviewed the 24 students, I wanted to take into account special considerations on how the ELL program has evolved and how it impacted various ethnic and cultural groups within the school. There obviously were three very distinct different groups, the Guatemalan, the Haitian, and the Hispanic students, and what type of background, what kind of socioeconomic factors, educational background of your parents, all those things were questions that I had, and how those things impacted their learning process as they moved through Sand Mountain City schools. The introduction, one thing obviously out the gate to understand kind of our school system. Every school system is unique. This particular study, and this is later, obviously I could talk about this, but I think it's important to talk about it up front. This study, I may have some cognitive bias within the study. I thought there was a need for this study at my particular school. I'm doing this through the lens of a teacher that sees this as an issue within the school. But to do this, so I do think it's something that could be relevant and shared with district coordinators. So the first thing I had to do was basically research the history of the school and kind of the region of the country and how that has changed. And what I found was very fascinating. Essentially, after a very deep dive into the history of the Sand Mountain region, I saw a 20 to 30 year mass migration pattern in this part of rural Alabama, a place that was 98% white as late as 1991 is now over 50% minority. This migration has obviously changed the dynamics of the school system immensely. ELL program was not needed in the school. Even 20 years ago, there was less than 5% of the school was ELL. So you're seeing just a huge shift very quickly in this particular school system. And a lot of it has to do with the poultry industry as a catalyst to this particular region and bringing people from Central America, whether that be Guatemalan or Mexican or other particular immigrant groups like Haitian, to work in the poultry industry. So with that, there comes teacher misconceptions surrounding these groups and cultural misconceptions, as well as educational misconceptions and language and linguistic misconceptions that teachers may bring with them in the New South. This is obviously a map of the U.S. immigrant population by state and county, and this is an older map. I tried to find an updated version, but as of 2018, Marshall County obviously is one of the growing counties within the state of Alabama related to immigration and population, and that number has only went up since 2018. During the first portion of the class, we went through a literature review, and without reading everything off the slide, essentially this is not a new problem. There's been a rapid increase in ELL learners. Teachers in the South have limited training on how to help these students. The teachers, unfortunately, are somewhat monolithic and have been shown to have a monolithic mindset when it comes to English language instruction. Some are even unaware of the different types of models like blended and bilingual models. Those models are not common in the state of Alabama. There may be some blended immersion instruction, but it's not even close to 70-30 or even 50-50 in the native language. The native language is not used in most school systems as a complementary piece to these ELL students' learning. It is not necessarily seen as a barrier, but it is obviously not used alongside the English language. And studies have shown, recent studies have shown that ELL students who have received some sort of blended language immersion, whether that be in elementary school or beyond, develop both better listening and writing skills. So, interviewing these students as they pass through high school, and what could have this school system done better? What did they do well? From an English language learner standpoint, I thought was a crucial question, obviously, as a teacher within the school system. And I did believe it was something that was relevant. So, my methodology, obviously, I went through about this from a qualitative standpoint, interviewed 24 students, the EL district coordinator. I also interviewed one of the translators. I interviewed teachers. I say interviewed through a Google form, 50 teachers. Out of the 50 teachers I sent the form to, 36 responded. So my qualitative study, obviously, hopefully I can tell this narrative well. I worry about being able to tell that narrative of these English language learner speakers. I did have to have, obviously, a translator with me for some of the interviews, and some obviously were more beneficial than others. But my hope is that this research does shed light on the story of the individuals involved. And hopefully I can do that through a qualitative lens effectively. The summary of my findings upon the examination of the ELL program, essentially I found that many of the initiatives within the program are very sporadically defined, and even more so sporadically enforced. Teachers complained about the high level lack of training, almost being a thrown to the wolves scenario, is how one teacher described it. Self-education. And this obviously is a barrier to providing any type of high quality education to these students, is that, there was not only that, is there was a difficulty. The language barrier becomes difficult when there's lack of translators, when there's lack of administrative support from a professional development standpoint, and a lack of basically understanding of how this community has been blended into to the fabric. Okay, and then obviously it's still new, but again, there's a huge difference between students' educational, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. And because of this, the program tends to be almost designed in a monolithic fashion, and there is lack of blended language immersion past the basically second year in the program. And once the students leave that first year where they receive basic English instruction, it can be very, very tough within the classroom. And those interviews, if you read the paper, shed light on those issues. And obviously I didn't have time to quote every single thing from the paper, but just some very, very eye-opening stories from the students that were interviewed, as well as the translators and the other district personnel. So the conclusions and recommendations from the study are very, very simple, and the students talk about just the backgrounds that they had, and how they came to America, and how they were treated in elementary school, and the difficulty, especially early on when you have very little language instruction and needing a crutch kind of to lean on, and almost being expected and judged on your work in English. So the glaring problem within the district is simply communication. I point this out of the paper and suggest, as a recommendation and conclusion, that teachers have some sort of, not even only professional development, but some sort of incentive to have bilingual, capabilities. That ability would break down a lot of issues in communication that students have interacting with their teachers on a daily basis. That lack of understanding leads to students and teachers kind of glossing over the problem, and we can't help each other, and it's a problem that essentially both ends have, is the teachers don't know how to help and the students don't know how to ask, and obviously that's an issue. Another conclusion would be cultural norms awareness training. Essentially, many of the teachers, and this is not a knock on the teachers, many of the teachers from the survey, had very little idea of some of the multicultural traditions that many of these students, come from on a daily basis. That would be a great way to build some empathy and connect with these students and learn about kind of a mass you teach me about your culture awareness training. Is vitally needed within the school system. Parent involvement and community outreach needs to increase twofold, if not more. The average educational level of many of the students we spoke to, their parents was fifth grade. It was uncommon to have a student say that their parents graduated past 10th grade. Most of them fifth grade or lower, and shockingly, the women obviously got very little formal education whatsoever. So that is an issue as well. The district, I say, should prioritize parent engagement through maybe a community night, school-wide tours, and even educational support materials if needed. There is a complete lack of feedback loop between the parents and the stakeholders within the school system. Because they can't, ask any questions up the chain of command. And there is only 4 translators, and I'm saying that correctly, 4 full-time translators for a student population of 1,647 students. Now, not all of those are EL, but a sizable portion is, and there's only 4 full-time translators. So more translators to assist not only the students, but the teachers as well. Is just a glaring need in certain subjects, for sure. And while most of the translators on staff are Spanish speaking, about 4 to 5% of this population is Haitian, and there is no Haitian translator on staff. And that was another glaring need that was mentioned by the Haitian students, the new Haitian students that are coming to this school system. So some limitations and directions for future research. Obviously, this is a very small sample size. I interviewed 24 students over the course of 3 days. The geography, this is limited to a very small school system. I say small school system, just one school system, only the high school, the juniors and seniors within that particular high school. And like I said, I may have some sort of cognitive bias. I may be too close to the subject matter as a teacher, but as I mentioned before, I felt like it was a relevant subject, one that I could actually learn something from and take and possibly direct some change in some small manner within the school system. So if nothing else, I have learned a lot about my own school system in a positive manner, and can take that to maybe some district leaders and set a plan for action. This research could be expanded into neighboring districts, and really my hope is that everyone learns more about the population of students that they have, because too often in education, we just fail to ask the students, what do you think about this? What do you think about the initiatives here? And that was my goal. And I believe not only did I learn a lot, but hopefully the students felt comfortable sharing those ideals and insights. So thank you for listening. I know it probably went a little bit longer than it should have, but this is Corey Krieger, summary of 709 EDS applied research.